Guys, it's Chaos Chrono back with another deck opening. We're on to number 6 out of our Dark Tidings display. How's everybody feeling about this set? Competitive side? Less competitive? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's see what we got today. Okay, we got ourselves a Shadow, Star Alliance, and Untamed deck. Tabin, Mongoose of Elsay. Not a bad house combination, but I don't think there's really any bad combinations in this set. So yeah, let's get this open and see what we got. Alright, starting with Untamed, we have Youngest Bear. It's a 2-power creature with Reap. You may reap with one of Youngest Bear's neighbors. We have the Pixie. It's an upgrade. This creature gains Reap, gain 1 Amber. Myliope, 4-power creature. While the tide is high, Myliope gains Skirmish. And before fight, enrage the creature Myliope fights, and each of that creature's neighbors. Mookling, 2-power creature. Your opponent's keys cost plus X Amber, where X is Mookling's power. Keyfrog, 2-power creature with Destroyed, forge a key at current cost. Pelonia, enhanced with a damage pip. 2-power creature with Elusive. After you play another creature, if the tide is high, gain 1 Amber. All Tied Up. It's an action. Amber whenever you play it. If the tide is high, gain 1 Amber. Otherwise, raise the tide. Ritual of Balance. It's an artifact with action. If your opponent has 6 Amber or more, steal 1 Amber. Mushroom Man. 2-power creature. Mushroom Man gets plus 3 power for each unforged key you have. So starts off as an 11-power creature. Fangtooth Cavern. It's an artifact. Amber whenever you play it. At the end of your turn, destroy the least powerful creature. Dredging Druid. 2-power creature with Elusive. Reap. If the tide is high, put up to 3 creatures from your discard pile on top of your deck. 2 copies of Dredging Druid. And that's it for Untamed. Moving on to Star Alliance, we have Zap. It's an action. Amber whenever you play it. Deal 1 damage to a creature for each house represented among creatures in play. Light of the Archons. It's an upgrade. Amber whenever you play it. This creature gets plus 1 power and plus 1 armor for each upgrade attached to it. Lieutenant Valmart, 3-power creature with Play, Fight, Reap. If the tide is high, keys cost plus 3 Amber during your opponent's next turn. Grand Alliance Council. It's an action. Choose a creature of each house. Destroy each creature not chosen. 2 copies of Grand Alliance Council. CR Officer Hawkins, 2-power creature with Deploy. Gain 1 Amber for each of CR Officer Hawkins' non-Star Alliance neighbors. 2 copies of him. Ambervac. It's an upgrade. Play. Raise the tide. This creature gains at the start of your turn. If the tide is high, capture 2 Amber. Static Collection Array. It's an artifact. Amber whenever you play it. Your keys cost -1 while the tide is high and +1 while the tide is low. Cheetah, or CH337A, 3-power creature with Elusive. While the tide is high, each of Cheetah's neighbors gains Elusive. Professor Emeritus Kering, 1-power creature with Deploy. Play, Fight, Reap. Use one of Professor Kering's neighbors. If the tide is high, also use his other neighbor. 2 copies of him. Wow. That's it for Star Alliance. Moving on to Shadows. We have One-Eyed Willa, 2-power creature. While the tide is high, One-Eyed Willa gains Elusive and Skirmish, and has Fight, steal 1 Amber. It's like a conditional Umbra. 2 copies of One-Eyed Willa. Mug, it's an action. Amber whenever you play it. Move 1 Amber from a creature to your pool. Deal 2 damage to that creature. Hornswoggle. It's an action. Amber whenever you play it. Use an enemy artifact as if it were yours. Hobsnobber, 3-power creature. With action, if your opponent has 6 Amber or more, steal 2 Amber. 2 copies of him. A lot of duplicates. Gaspipes Malone, 3-power creature, with before fight, the creature Gaspipes Malone fights captures 1 Amber from its own side. 2 copies of him. Again, a lot of doubles. Cement Shoes. It's an action, Amber whenever you play it. Deal 2 damage to a creature. If this damage destroys that creature, raise the tide. Old Bruno. 3 power creature with elusive. Play, capture 3 Amber. Miasma Bomb. It's an artifact. It enhanced that 1 damage pit that was on the Chelonia. And has action, destroy Miasma Bomb. Your opponent skips the Forge a Key step during their next turn. Getting close to the end, we have Master Plan. It's an artifact, Amber whenever you play it. Put a card from your hand face down under Master Plan, and has Omni. Play the card under Master Plan, destroy Master Plan. That's the last card of the deck. I'm going to pull out all the highlights of this deck and get in a rough estimate as to how well I think this deck will perform. Alright, looking at the key parts of this deck, starting with Untamed, we have the Druid. So his ability is to put a lot of creatures back on top of your deck, as long as the tide is high. While this does help you become more efficient and bring back creatures that are important to you, it does kind of signal to your opponent what you're planning to do for your next turn, as I don't see a way to draw them on the same turn. Like, that'd be a nice setup for a punctuated equilibrium if that was in this deck, but it isn't. Because there's 2 copies, it's a highlight of this deck, but otherwise, in terms of functionality, I'm not quite sure how well that's going to work. There are 21 creatures in this deck, so given the number of creatures, it's pretty likely that that's going to be useful. However, again, I don't like signaling to the opponent what I'm going to do next turn. Fangtooth Cavern is a bit anti-synergistic in this deck because we have a lot of small creatures in this deck, so more likely than not the Fangtooth Cavern is going to hit our own creatures, so we may not even play the Fangtooth Cavern in this deck. Sadly, there's no way to purge our own cards either to make this deck run a bit smoother. Ritual Balance is always a nice artifact to have for Amber control. All Tied Up, and as we look down this line of cards here, All Tied Up, Ambervac, and Cement Shoes are important in that they are the cards that affect the tide. So with this deck having as many cards as it does that relies on the tide, having more of these cards is very important. So looking at Chelonia, we have the extra Amber Burst potential in Untamed. It definitely depends on that creature though, and the tide to be on our side. We have 7 other creatures in addition to Chelonia in Untamed, so that is a fair amount of burst potential. That's pretty much it for Untamed, and so it's a bit of a mismatch. It does have a burst potential, but definitely cards that are a bit anti-synergistic, especially with the rest of the deck. We have the Professor. His ability is to use the Neighbors. So this is a deck that I think highlights a lot of cards that relies on you having a board and having creatures next to each other that aren't from Starlines. So that creates a bit of efficiency plays to be able to use and bounce creatures' effects off each other. So on a Starline's turn, you can use the Dredging Druid to bring back creatures and put them on top of your deck ready for the next turn. Things like that. The static collection rate is just a bit important because it does affect key costs for yourself. Given that the opponent has the last chance to affect the tide prior to your turn, I don't think it's all that useful of a card, but it does force decks outside of Dark Tidings to play the tide a bit more than they might have expected in order to increase your key costs. Hawkins is similar to the Professor in that it needs to be deployed in between 2 creatures that are not of the Starline's house to get the maximum benefit, and just helps with Amber generation. Ambervac, we mentioned. Grand Alliance Council. It's essentially a wipe, -1 creature from each house. So, especially when you have a matchup of houses, that's a very good thing. A few other tools for the Starlines kit, but otherwise, the main highlight shows that it focuses around deployment and the board state overall. Finally, moving into Shadows, Master Plan is always a great card. Now looking into the doubles in Shadows, Gas Pipes Malone, which is a bit more Amber control, capturing from their own side. However, without Skirmish, it's a bit rough to be able to use them more than once. Hobsnobber, good Amber control on a creature, but creature-based Amber control, you know how I feel about that. One-Eyed Willa, again, creature-based, fight-based Amber control. Cement Shoes, we mentioned, and the Breath of Shadows does more of what we expect. So overall, Just looking at it on face value and being board dependent, it's not my playstyle, but it is interesting and may have some potential to work. In terms of board wipes, it is a little lacking. It's dependent on those 2 copies of Grand Alliance Council, so an Eaton Star can really mess up this deck. And it's a bunch of small creatures, there's some anti-synergy going on. So all in all, I'm not really feeling this deck. Just to give it a number, my gut tells me probably a 60 flat. But there is some synergy that does work well together. So I'm going to rate it a 60 flat. Yeah, not a deck that I personally would play with long term, but I might feel differently after I tally everything up, as I haven't done that yet. But that wraps up this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel to support it for more Keyforge content like this. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, be kind and happy forging.